How's it going, ladies and folks? My name is RR Bauso, and this is my show. You're about to hear Chapter 5 of my ongoing Sword and Sorcery narrative, a story written, read, performed, and edited, all with your ear holes in mind. So kick back, relax, and allow me to unfurl the wizard scroll. Now this one here is a tale that is both near and dear to my heart. It is Chapter 5, The Beast of Mount Shitcicle. The crystal apple tree was dead ahead, and she could feel it. She could feel its power, its tendrils of arcane energy that reached out and beckoned to her, taking their hold on her psyche even from all the way from the bottom of those stairs. The elf practically flung herself down to B2F, deep down into the cavernous space where the tree had taken root untold ages ago. Even with the knowledge Krystall had gleaned of this place from that dusty old wizard's dusty old scroll, the underground crystal grotto had exceeded all of her expectations. Despite being 2 stories underground, this final cavern she propelled herself into was lit up bright as day. Massive, iridescent crystals, similar to the ones found in the previous 2 rooms, though far larger and far, far brighter. They were embedded in the elevated ceiling above, bathing this chamber with a gay pride flag's worth of colorful lights. They all slowly cycled through the Roy G. Biv spectrum as Krystall gazed upon them with a curious fascination. An endless stream of water poured into the grotto from above, from the large circular hole in the wall several yards above ground level, reflecting off more of that iridescent light as it spewed forth into a small pool in the corner.
"Oh yeah, this is the place all right,"
she concluded as the object of her desire came into view from some dozen yards away in the dead center of it all. In all of its shimmering glory, a crystal apple tree that sat unassumingly within a sole patch of dirt in the whole place.
Bingo bongo!
Chief Queef stood atop the big rock before his fellow centaurs, gathered together in preparation of the annual choosing ceremony. And he cupped his hands around his mouth, projecting his voice throughout the entirety of their small settlement.
"Let this trial by nosies commence!"
The camera panned out to a nearby tree, whose avian inhabitants hurriedly flew away upon hearing the chief's thunderous shout. And as his audience looked on in a psyched-up anticipation, Queef began to count.
1, 2, 3...
The whole tribe responded nearly simultaneously, as each of those man-horse hybrids touched a finger to his or her nose. Everyone, that is, besides Wronghalf, who simply sat there in the grass, his lack of arms, fingers, and a nose handicapping him severely in this most sacred centaur game.
"Looks like Wronghalf loses,"
Queef announced to the tribe.
"A pathetic display, as always. Everyone, laugh at the little bedshitter."
And so they did. Chuckles, chortles, and guffaws spread throughout the tribe as they formed a large circle around the reverse centaur, as they each pointed a finger in his direction and belittled him even further.
"Oh, but it's not fair, guys!"
Wronghalf sobbed as he attempted to stand. He was grounded, unable to rise to his feet, tears streaming freely from his eyes as he tried and failed to quell his centaur brethren's laughter.
"I don't even have hands! How do you expect me to—"
But before he could continue his protestation, Queef bore holes into the little reverse centaur, silencing him with his stone-cold stare alone. The others soon fell silent as well, but only following the chief's signal. He clenched his fist and raised it into the air, before speaking up once again.
"The sacred centaur ritual of nosies has hereby concluded. Great hustle out there, fellas. All except for you, of course, Wronghalf."
The scene shifted in the span of a heartbeat. Wronghalf now stood at the edge of centaur territory, fanny pack full of letters and prepared to embark on his quest.
"But guys,"
the reverse centaur cried out loud,
"I don't even have pants! What if I get frostbite down there?"
But his cries fell on deaf ears as the rest of the tribe continued to wave goodbye undeterred, as they shouted words of encouragement. At least that's what Wronghalf considered them to be, though they did very little in that department.
"Good luck, Q-Tip!"
"Knock 'em dead, cuck!"
Safe travels, you unlovable piece of trash, and watch out for iced tea. Legend says the frosted north is his domain. Ice-T was the boogeyman of many a childhood tale, whose exploits included everything from eating centaurs whole to co-starring on a magic rectangle show called Law and Orc Der SVU. But as Wronghalf grew into adulthood, he had learned the truth. According to Queef himself, Ice-T was a total fabrication. One big lie told with the sole purpose of frightening the young centaurs into good behavior. Nothing more and nothing less. And though Wronghalf knew better of it, the reverse centaur still couldn't help but shudder at the very notion of encountering such a fiendish creature. His premonition caused him to freeze up, his pasty human legs quickly taking on a sickly pale blue coloration as his surroundings altered once more. He watched as the grasses and hillocks that encompassed his tribe's turf, as they too froze over, as they were coated in snow, as the sunny blue sky above grew dark and cloudy, and as the warm summer breeze crossfaded into a harsh, frigid gale. The sudden temperature drop was so great that Wronghalf's dick snapped off and hit the ground running. It sprouted an appropriately sized horse body from where it had been severed, stood of its own accord, and galloped off faster than a speeding arrow as the castrated reverse centaur looked on in abject terror.
Wait! Come back!
Wronghalf cried out to his detached donger as it disappeared round a large snowbank and out of sight. He spared one final glance in that direction, then turned back to face his home, his fellow tribesmen, as they all began to laugh riotously at his castrated cockles. But among their ranks emerged a new character, one who Wronghalf had never met, yet already knew oh so well. The very boogeyman of his childhood, the one he'd heard fables and tall tales about all throughout his formative years.
Ice-T!
That's right, asshat.
A 12-foot tall yeti with the real Ice-T's face superimposed on top, complete with goatee and ponytail, had suddenly appeared, seemingly from thin air, and now stood there among the centaurs, stood heaving and laughing alongside each of the reverse centaur's parents.
We hope you shit yourself and freeze to death, son.
Wronghalf's mother, a total sea milf, might I add, nuzzled Ice-T's arm as she talked down to her only child.
Yeah, that's right, you little bastard,
added Peter, the reverse centaur's stepfather.
We never loved you, and by the way, we're burning all your things as soon as you leave. What? Why? Well, we gotta clear space for Ice-T, of course. He's renting your room starting...
Peter looked down at his pocket watch just as it struck 4:20.
Starting now.
I'm so excited to be your new son, guys.
The Yeti elated as he went in for a group hug with a pair of centaurs. He gave Wronghalf the stink eye as Peter and his mother hugged that giant creature back tightly. And as that beast held Wronghalf's parents in a loving embrace, something that Wronghalf himself could never physically do, Ice-T mimed the throat-slitting motion across his neck with one of those razor-sharp claws, while also inaudibly mouthing the words, "Totally gonna plow your mom, dude."
No!
The reverse centaur cried out in anguish.
Mom! Peter! You can't kick me out! I'm your son!
But before either centaur could respond, a gigantic golden hand emerged from the sky, grabbing Wronghalf by the long, matted mane. It pulled him up and away from the situation in the nick of time. Higher, ever higher, straight through the storming clouds above. Higher still, straight toward the pair of emerald lights emanating from above. Krystall yoinked Wronghalf's limp and castrated form from the bag of holding at her hip, pulling him up and out by his long, soot-black hair, before shoving a crystal apple directly into his open, slack-jawed mouth. She moved his jaw up and down for him, forcing his unresponsive maw to chew, to crush it up into small enough pieces so that it could slide into his digestive tract without issue. And in an instant, once enough of the apple had made refuge inside Wronghalf's stomach, the reverse centaur glowed from head to toe with a red, delicious aura. An aura which cured his hypothermia-induced coma instantly. His eyelids shot open once more as the light dissipated, and he sneezed out the obsidian wand lodged in his nostril, shooting it directly into Krystall's waiting hand.
What? Where am I? Did you save me?
He asked the elf at his side all of this as he struggled to take stock of his surroundings, as much to her delight, he had been fully healed, save for one notable exception.
Hey! Where the heck did my dick go? Go.
He complained out loud, far louder than he should have, loud enough that he had, inadvertently made his and Krystall's presence known to this final chamber's bestial denizen, who was drawn to the pitiable outcry from round a corner at the far end of the blue stone-lined space.
Who the frick thinks they can lose a dick in my cave?
A deep, gravelly voice rumbled from the other end of the massive chamber, accompanied by the thunderous footsteps that shook the whole grotto with each step. And before Krystall or Wronghalf could react, he had entered the room. The reverse centaur was stunned, flabbergasted, confused, his mouth agape in terror at the sight that befell him. Because into the chamber stomped a 12-foot-tall, hairy beast, clad in an appropriately sized bathrobe, clutching a big bowl of frosted flakes in his hand, and most shockingly of all, with the real Ice-T's face superimposed upon his countenance, complete with goatee and ponytail.
It can't be!
Wronghalf managed to utter as a nugget of shit squeezed its way out from his ass cheeks and onto the smooth, blue-hewn granite floor. And after relieving himself, he promptly hid behind Krystall, who was far more concerned with the colossal, encroaching yeti than she was with the horse head now fearfully burying itself between her thighs from behind.
What the fuck is that thing?
The elf whispered to her recently revived companion as he stood nestled between her legs like a baby penguin, shivering and shaking in fear.
It's the Beast of Mount Shitcicle,
Wronghalf replied.
Ice-T, but he's supposed to be a myth.
You know, asshat,
The yeti taunted Wronghalf, whose unfortunate positioning really did make it look like he was wearing Krystall's ass like a hat as he ambled forward.
sometimes I sit at home, you know, and I watch the magic rectangle, and I wonder what it would be like to live in some place like, you know, the Cosby Show, Ozzie and Harriet, you know, where the chops came and got your cat out of the tree, all your friends died at old age.
He ceased his approach, now standing a good 10 yards away from the tree and his intruders, as he shifted his attention to Krystall, who had taken up the best fighting stance she could manage with Wronghalf tucked between her legs.
But you see, I live in a frickin' cave, and unfortunately, shit ain't like that!
As if on cue, hundreds of miniature versions of Ice-T, each no taller than a foot or two, and each with the exact same visage as their father. They too emerged from round the corner by the far wall, all wielding simple wooden spears, small enough for their tiny hands to carry. They poured into that spacious room until it was completely filled from wall to wall. During all this, however, Krystall had nonchalantly reached up and plucked a second apple from the tree immediately behind her, not at all concerned with the small army quickly crowding around her, nor with whatever the giant yeti before her had to say. She instead held the apple-shaped, apple-sized gemstone in her hand and gazed upon her own red-tinted reflection, displayed 14 separate times over and across its polygonal, crystalline surface.
Neat!
Hey buddy, what the heck? What did I just say?
Ice-T pointed a long, razor-sharp claw in the elf's direction as he roared, the vibrations causing the cave to rumble in response, and causing Wronghalf to abandon the safety of Krystall's thighs and to instead make a break for the exit. But we didn't get far, because as Ice-T's words violently crashed into the walls of the cave, his younglings all stormed forward, an avalanche of fur that came tumbling toward the elf and reverse centaur from all flanks.
That tree and all of its fruits belong to me and my babies, and we will see our property returned the easy way or the hard way.
The miniature Ice-T's were upon her instantly, upon Krystall before she could even reply with some sort of funny quip. The ones closest wrapped their furry arms tightly around each of the elf's boots, and they began to pile on top of one another, weighing her down with their collective mass as they held her in place, while others poked and prodded her legs and torso with their tiny spears, glorified pointy sticks which, luckily for her, could barely even break the skin, but were annoying regardless. The elf fought her assailants off as best she could manage with only one hand, bonking them on their Ice-T looking heads with the butt of her bone spear as she held her pilfered apple high above her head, out of the reach of even the tallest of Ice-T's younglings. And as more and more of them began hurling themselves at her, clawing and clambering up the elf's body in an attempt to relieve her of her stolen prize, one unlucky bastard had unwittingly used her tits as handholds, clutching them tightly as he too scaled her narrow frame. Krystall punted this Yeti across the room with all her might, shaking him loose with a sharp jerk to the left before sending him screaming through the air with a well-timed knee to the hindquarters.
Clearly your father never taught you ingrates about personal space.
She panted as he threw two more of them to the ground as they fell flat on their backs, lying in shock on the granite cave floor. And as three more of the monsters leapt upon her, taking the fallen two's places in but mere moments.
Can you guys, fuck off?
Ah, heck nah!
Ice-T howled as he threw his cereal bowl aside and sprung into action, sprinting toward the elf with a quickness simply impossible for his creature of his size to naturally possess.
I know you didn't just drop an F-bomb in front of my kids!
He stormed across the room on all fours, barreling through his own children, knocking some aside and steamrolling others as he charged at the weighed down and immobilized elf, whose contraband was plucked free from her hand right before one of the Yeti's gigantic, swinging fists came crashing into her gut. The impact knocked the wind out of her, knocked her loose of each youngling's grasp, but while they were merely sent sprawling onto the cool granite floor, Krystall was far less fortunate. She was sent flying through the air in an arcing path that ended in a small pool at the far corner. An ice beetle, who had been in here this whole time, watching the ordeal unnoticed from its spot on the wall, held up a small sign that read, "Yikes!" above its head, as Krystall's body hit the water with a splash and sunk like a stone. Meanwhile, those tiny Yetis had also set on subduing Wronghalf, chasing him in circles around the cavernous stone chamber, as his dickless self did his best to avoid them. As more of the creatures joined in the chase, hucking with little pointed sticks at the back of his legs in a futile effort to slow his panicked retreat. The reverse centaur juked the Yetis left and right, bobbing and weaving, ducking and dodging Ice-T's younglings with a quickness honed through a lifetime spent in the company of normal centaurs, with their equine bodies built for speed. But with the only exit now blocked off by the big kahuna himself, the Ice-T patriarch, and with nowhere else to run, all of his disciplined training was proven meaningless. Dozens of the younglings had now joined in the chase, and together they had no trouble cornering him up against one of those granite cavern walls. Wronghalf, with all escape routes blocked off, with scores of those little beasts now forming a tight semicircle around him, he trembled and shit in fear as the younglings entered within attacking range.
Cut that dickless prick on a stick open, babies!
Ice-T called from his spot in front of the stairwell across the room.
Tear the crystal apple out from his goddamn stomach!
The younglings obliged, their dangerously sharp claws unsheathing from their fingertips as they skulked forward. They relished in the abject terror they milked from their quarry as they advanced towards him at a snail's pace. And he was so very terrified, shit pouring out of him like a runaway soft-serve machine, so much so that he failed to notice that his forehead had just begun to glow. A detail which was taken into account by the younglings, who upon seeing that tiny red dot materialize on his forehead, had all but ceased their approach. They watched in confusion as the dot grew larger, grew brighter by the moment, as it protruded outwards and flopped down, and as the light dispersed. One final nugget of shit dribbled down the reverse centaur's leg as a bit of fear pea squirted into his own eye, and the mini Ice-T's laughed riotously at the sight, because Wronghalf's wiener had just grown back, square in the center of his equine visage.
What the fuck?
He caught himself before he said the word, the one that had gotten his new friend punched clear across the room, then continued his thought.
Fudge?
His newly regrown forehead wiener flopped over each eye as he jerked his head either direction. First to the right, toward the pool where Krystall had been flung, but he caught not so much as a glimpse of the elf under the water's highly reflective surface. So he looked back to the left, to where the Ice-T patriarch now stood, looming right there over him, within swinging distance, with just the biggest grin you'd ever seen on his face, with row after row of sharpened, gleaming white teeth lining a maw spread open far wider than what he thought was physically possible.
In all my years as co-star on Dick Direwolf's Law and Order SVU,
he began before popping the apple into his mouth and swallowing it whole. Then he clasped his hands together, interlaced his fingers, then raised them high above his head as he continued.
Never have I ever seen somebody so damn stupid looking as you.
The younglings seemed to agree, as more and more of them have crowded around to get a peek at Wronghalf's schlong before their father could flatten the intruder into a fine paste with his patented double fist hammer punch.
Any last words? Caw.
Rage had consumed the reverse centaur on many occasions over the course of his young life, typically during situations in which his guttural screams and kicking legs had no real objective about them, and he would blindly lash out at whatever inanimate object was closest until he tired himself out. But this was something else entirely, because as those beasts were all soon to discover firsthand, Wronghalf's rage had been infused with something new, infused with a far more potent emotion, one which provided his furious, aimless kicking and screaming with aim, with a clear goal, the utter decimation of Ice-T's familial line, once and for all. Yes, his anger, his hate and his pain, they had been interwoven with something far more primal. Something that Wronghalf had never experienced until right then and right there. Desperation. Rage and desperation go together like peanut butter and cheese. Though it may not seem like it at first glance, it's a winning combination for sure. A pair that, when blended together, miraculously makes each component far more appealing than either would be separately. And with both smearing themselves all over Wronghalf's psyche in equal measure, there was absolutely nothing that could stop that horse head with legs from imposing his indomitable will on the world around him. So upon hearing the word cuck for the second time that day, Wronghalf's demeanor shifted instantly. He had gone from hopeless dismay, inconsolable bawling and tear-stained eyes to triggered at the flick of a bean. And as he gritted his teeth, snorted tiny clouds of steam from his nostrils, and did whatever the horse equivalent of lowering a brow is, he spoke. Haltingly.
Nobody calls me a fucking cuck!
The reverse centaur reared back and delivered a leaping high kick right onto the beast's crotch, felling the titan in a single, low blow. Ice-T staggered backward several yards, though ultimately he toppled to the ground, flattening a few unlucky younglings as he crash-landed, cupping his testicles in his mighty hands as he lay helplessly on his side in the fetal position. The reverse centaur delivered dick kick after dick kick, indiscriminate to gender, as younglings both male and female alike fell before the mighty kicks of Wronghalf's bare legs, the ones which coursed with rage and desperation in equal measure as he neighed exaltedly between each nut-crushing crack of foot on funbag. And by the time he had arrived at his destination, within kicking distance of the big kahuna himself, not a single of those abominable children was laughing. In fact, they no longer even attempted to retaliate, opting instead to clear a path for the raging reverse centaur as he charged their own father, as they stood and or lay there, too hopeless to do anything about those two pasty human legs, as they built up speed and delivered a kangaroo kick square into Ice-T's belly. In response, the Yeti, that abominable beast, projectile vomited the apple out from his massive tooth-filled maw and into the air, launched it in an arcing path that ended with a splash. And as it sunk into the depths of that pool in the corner of the room, the ice beetle from before held up a new sign, one that read, "Oh fuck, shit's about to go down," because just a few short moments after the apple had sunk beneath the surface and out of view, Krystall Everfall rose from the water, landing in a gratuitous crouch on the ground, with the very air around her sparkling and cracking with electricity, as the water covering her body instantly evaporated, with her eyes now glowing a bright, hot fuchsia as the apple, now impaled through the obsidian tip of her wand, coaxed forth an arcane energy that took the entire room by storm. That supercharged wand, the one whose apple-shaped, apple-sized tip now glowed with the same grayish pink as her eyes. It let loose a barrage of magic missiles that popped a cap in any ass unfortunate enough to be caught in her crosshairs. As a voice that was not her own emanated from between her lips, speaking this eldritch incantation as she opened fire on them all.
Hustler, word, I pulled the trigger long, grit my teeth, spray till every yet is gone. Got my block sewn on the dope spots. Last thing I sweat to suck up on chop. Move like a king when I roll hops. Try to flex, bang, another yeti drops.
And as those mysterious, arcane words rattled the mortal ears of all those in attendance, magic missile after magic missile met their mark, crashing into more small furry bodies by the second, never failing to explode them into guts and gore on contact, until none remained.
You son of a lich! Yeti is our word!
Ice-T roared so loud that the whole cavern quaked in response, shaking loose chunks of rock, stalactites, and multicolored crystals that now dropped freely from the ceiling. He was peeved, understandably. These two miscreants just broke into his home, stole from him, kicked him in the nards, and murdered all of his children. Or at least, all the ones that he himself hadn't killed on accident. So he screamed in rage as the crippling pain in his hairy balls finally subsided, as he made to stand back up onto his feet. But before he could even get onto his hands and knees, Wronghalf whirled around and gave him a flying roundhouse kick to the lower jaw, grounding him once again as a particularly large rock plummeted from the ceiling above and cracked his skull open like a giant iced-tea looking egg.
Holy Jeebus! That might have been a little overkill.
Krystall called from her side of the chamber as she jammed her bone spear into the ground and vaulted herself through the air toward the exit.
Come on, horseman! We got a GTFO ASAP!
Wronghalf followed suit. He dashed for the stairs with the swiftness of a normal centaur as Krystall's spinning and backflipping flight ended abruptly onto his back. But he didn't miss a beat, bearing the added load with little issue, as legs by ZZ Top played behind him, booking it up the stairs, out of the frosted dungeon, and the fuck away from Mount Shitcicle, escaping just before the exit was sealed off by falling rocks all crochet-like.
So where are we going now?
Krystall asked as the music began to fade, as Wronghalf made a sharp left turn and ran into the sunset.
Santor's workshop. I've got a delivery to make.
Thanks for tuning in to me screaming about Yetis for a half hour. If you stuck around this far, it's safe to say that you probably enjoyed what you just heard and are waiting with bated breath for the next one. Episode 6, as always, will be the best one yet. That's a Bauso promise. So, while you wait on that, there's plenty you can do right this minute to ensure as many peeps as possible can get their earholes on it when it drops. First, iTunes reviews. It would be very much appreciated if you left a good one, because that'll help the Wizard Scroll rise in the ranks, which means more people listening to the show. That's a good thing, isn't it? Next, if you're not already, subscribe to the feed on your platform of choice. This show's probably on there. It's on a lot of feeds. I made sure of that. So, press that good old subscribe button and you'll never miss out on a new episode. Finally, the most important step of them all, spreading good word of mouth. Recommending the Wizard Scroll to anybody who'll listen to what you have to say. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, scream from the rooftop that this show is the bee's knees and that a new episode will be waiting for y'all next Monday. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter, links in the episode description. And until next time, bye.